are here with another episode of the Beyond the Breakpoint podcast, and I am pleased to announce that we have a wonderful guest here today, Howard Chang. Howard is an executive for multiple different companies, a lifelong entrepreneur. He's had many different ventures, and he has some amazing stories that he'd love to share with you guys. I think this episode is going to be a great one, and I can't wait for you guys to learn, just like I'm about to as well. So, with that, Howard, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hey, Zach, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I am a lifelong entrepreneur. I am the CEO of a company called the Turn Lab, as well as the CEO of one of the startups incubated by the Turn Lab called Just Meeting Rooms. And I'm learning every day, as all entrepreneurs do, as we try to scale these businesses globally.
Perfect, perfect. So yeah, really just especially to get myself and everyone else who's watching a lot more familiar with you and your journey. Tell us your story, especially coming out of university, especially some of the things I was able to learn about you. Your first business was started while you were in university. Tell us since then a lot of the journey you've been on and what some of your experiences have been and the lessons you've been able to acquire.
Yeah, I definitely did not come from an entrepreneurial household. My dad was a civil servant, immigrants to Canada. He was a civil servant. My mom was a guidance counselor at a school. So I was definitely a bit of the black sheep of the family in the sense that I fell into entrepreneurship kind of accidentally. It actually kind of started when I was 14. I wanted to make money to buy a bicycle to race bicycles when I was young. I had this idea I wanted to race bicycles. So I borrowed my dad's, when I say borrow, I really kind of stole my dad's lawnmower and I started mowing people's lawns for $5 a lawn when I was 14. And I ended up saving up a couple of $1,000s from doing this business and I bought myself a racing bike. And I think that was sort of where the entrepreneurial bug hit me, where I went, oh, I can make a lot more money doing this than I can with a paper route, as an example. So I always had sort of some side gigs going, even in university before I started my first official business. I had an opportunity to do some photography for a company. It was actually a furniture company to do some catalog work, which I kind of talked my way into doing because I had done some photography when I was younger. So I had a lot of these little side gigs going, and then I decided to open a business while in third year studying architecture at University of Toronto, which is not a light course load, by the way. So I launched a retail business in 1980, basically working and studying 90 hours a week. Will not recommend that to anyone, by the way, but it was definitely a steep learning curve, a great introduction into entrepreneurship for me.
That's amazing, bro. It's amazing to hear, especially, yeah, like I said, to have that kind of workload and of all different types, not like you're just having one task of like 80, 90 hours a week to have to be able to manage all the different tasks you have to go through, make sure you don't forget any assignments, make sure there's no emails you have to respond to. That would be a lot to go through. So that's amazing to hear that kind of work ethic and perseverance you're able to show, especially at such a young age. It's incredible.
Well, one big advantage we had in those days, Zach, which you do not have now, is we had far fewer distractions, right? So we
Sure.
didn't have email. We didn't have cell phones.
Yeah.
We didn't have social media. We social media was meeting someone at a bar and having a conversation. So as much as there was a lot going on, it was also a lot more focused, right? So, when you went to school, you did what you did at school and then you were done, right?
Yeah.
You didn't have all the fault, like your professor wasn't emailing you after work going, yeah, but what about this? What about that? Like you were done. I
Yeah.
had my 32 hours of class load. I did my 32 hours. I went to my business, I ran that, I closed, I went home, went to sleep. No, sure, you're thinking about your business, but you don't have tasks outside. So I do think that your generation of entrepreneur, and I know you are also a young entrepreneur, you actually face more challenges in many ways. There are more distractions, there are more things pulling at your attention. So learning how to focus, learning time management, these are some of I coach a number of young entrepreneurs, and I would say those are some of the biggest obstacles they're overcoming and also seeking the right advice because right now
Yeah.
information is so ubiquitous. Obviously with AI, you guys are an AI expert. You guys know that AI can help a lot. It can also be a bit of a BS machine. So you have to also really navigate truth a lot more carefully in this day and age.
No, that's exactly, I mean, you're right. Especially when it comes to double checking, fact checking. Just because AI spits you an answer, it may be very easy to access the answer, but you have to confirm that exactly it is right. Because unfortunately, as we are making great inroads and advancing really fast with AI, it's not entirely there yet with being always accurate. So there are some things you have to double check on to make sure it delivers the answer you actually need.
Yeah, and talking to AI experts like yourselves, I've learned a few tricks of the trade. Like one of the first things I learned was After I ask, a fairly complex prompt with a large language model, I'll often follow up with, "Are you sure?" And I would say 50% of the time, the answer changes somewhat. So I do think that,
Interesting.
with all the tools we have, and we have very sophisticated tools these days, by the way. As a one of my companies, the Turn Lab, we do a lot of market research and audience intelligence. And there's no question artificial data coming from AI is extremely helpful. But as to your point, you do have to cross-reference and check where are these sources. Is this source coming from BBC or is it coming from 4chan? Like you kind of have to
Yeah.
navigate some of that, right?
No, it's so true. It's exactly it. And yeah, especially to learn more about your journey. I saw in your LinkedIn profile that you had a bankruptcy, you said, for one of your businesses that taught you a lot. And like I was mentioning earlier, for every entrepreneur, it's never a straight line up. There's always going to be ups and downs. And it's a big thing when we have those down moments that we actually learn lessons from them to avoid those same mistakes in the future. So with that whole bankruptcy and that scenario, what were some of the lessons you took away from that?
Well, I think the biggest lesson I learned is that falling isn't failing. Not getting up is probably failing. So we're all going to fall, right? And so whether we're stubbing our toes or whether we're breaking a leg, things happen in business. And going bankrupt at 29 after building a successful business for 10 years, I mean, my journey was kind of crazy. Like at 23, I kind of broke my first million in revenue. And then I bought my parents a brand new car. I bought myself a house at 25. I bought myself a brand new fire engine red Porsche at 25 as well. I was living the life of Riley. Like I was traveling, had
Love it.
money. And the biggest mistake I made at the time is I thought I was the smartest kid in the room, and I wasn't listening to enough good advice. And I would say that the thing I've learned more than anything else is surround yourself with really good, smart people that have your interests in mind. And I should have listened more because what I try to do is I try to expand my business on 17% bank interest. So that was what lending rates in the 80s were.
Yeah.
17%, a line of credit. And when you're in the retail business and your margins are slim and you're trying to expand, and I expanded into like, three retail stores, heavily leveraged. And eventually the bank just kind of went, his house is worth more than what he owes us. I think we're going to call our line. And they literally just called the line on us. And so we hadn't, done anything wrong per se, but the bank was mitigating its risk. And this was just around 1989 when the whole market kind of crashed and the whole
Yeah.
real estate market went down in Canada. And so the bank probably was being very smart. Like they basically got out before all of that happened. I paid the price. And then I spent 9 months in my parents' basement licking my wounds, lost my house. My wife left me. I was a single dad, raising a 4 and a 6-year-old by myself. It was a sad
Yeah.
situation. And so what I had to figure out was what is my next step. And I assessed everything. I assessed like, should I just go get a job? What am I actually good at? And there's a lot of self-doubt too, by the way. Even though I built a business for 10 years, I probably employed collectively, 200 people over that 10-year period. I totally had pretender syndrome. Like maybe I don't know anything. Maybe I'm not good at anything. And so finally, I said to my kids who were 4 and 6 at the time, like, I've been offered a really good job, and I'm thinking I'm taking it because I'm not sure if I have it in me to start another business. And my daughter, who was 4 at the time, said, "No, you'd make the worst employee ever." I go, "What do you mean by that?" He goes, "You'd be trying to take over the company within a few weeks, and they're going to fire you, Dad." And so that was a really sobering moment. And so I said, okay, I've got to reinvent myself. And so that was the start of my next business, which is thinking about what was I actually good at and could I actually make money at it?
No, that's an incredible story, man. Especially like you said, it's almost like the pursuit of happiness. Be unfortunately so down your luck at that point, but you still don't give up. And like you said, you could have just got a regular job and just, as like many would say, join the rat race and just become a normal Joe. But you still had that perseverance. It's like I want something more for myself, and it's amazing how the universe can deliver signs that way. That in this case is through your 4-year-old saying that no, Dad, an employee, it's just not for you. You are an owner. You are an executive. So that's amazing to see how you're able to make it work, brother. I'm very happy to hear that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a quite a convoluted journey, right? Entrepreneurship. And I would say that the most important The thing I've noticed most around great entrepreneurs is this constant and intense curiosity that most great entrepreneurs have, like this willingness to learn, willingness to adapt, willingness to change. I wouldn't say most entre, including myself, by the way, are brilliant. Like we're not brilliant.
I get you.
What we are is we're curious and we're always willing to learn. We're critical thinkers, right? And so I think where people get stuck and where how a lot of businesses decline is people get dogmatic and they start like believing a little bit too much in either their product or their service or their model. There's a trap people fall into is they actually fall in love with their idea or they fall in love with their product. And what I always say to people, first, fall in love with the problem you're trying to solve. If you do that first, then your product will become ideal
Yeah.
because you literally you spend enough time thinking through the actual challenge or the problem that needs to be solved, and that'll allow you to build the right product. So ideas are a dime a dozen. I had my design professor in university in architecture kind of called us all out once. You guys all think you're brilliant. You guys all came in with these great portfolios and your great marks. Ideas are a dime a dozen. It's ultimately about how do you apply your creative thinking to solving a problem? I mean,
Yeah.
essentially, architecture is design thinking, right? Design thinking is basically using design as a problem-solving technique. And I would say most businesses, great businesses, leverage that technique a lot. Design thinking is used by great financial leaders, great business leaders, tech leaders. It's a great way of looking at the world.
No, that's exactly it, my man. You're right. Because for so many people, and the best way to put it is as you did, ideas are a dime a dozen. It's easy to come up with the idea, to actually act on the idea and see it through to execution. That is a whole different level that most people are just not able to do, whether they even start in the first place or actually able to finish the job. Most are not. And it's the same with even being an architect, that the details matter. And so you can theorize what the bridge should look like or how it should be designed. But when it comes to actually building the bridge, it's either going to stand the weight and be able to hold up the cars or it's not. And so it really comes down to the execution of either gets the job done or it does not.
Yeah, I love that analogy of the bridge. I have a fellow who worked with me for many years on the technology side of my business, and he came from the civil engineering background, and he used to build these like really robust e-commerce sites. And a client once asked him like, why are we spending so much on the right infrastructure? He goes, you know, I'm building a bridge. Think of it this way. I'm building a bridge, and this bridge can't fall down. We don't want your site to be hacked or collapse when all of a sudden 800,000 users come on board this month for, Black Friday, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the execution is so key to your point, right? Like ideas are great, but execution is the gold.
No, you're entirely right. And even for that example, I know for especially whether it's different YouTube channels, many things like that, people who start to get a bit of growth behind them, like things like clothing drops are a big one. When they finally go live, people then rush to the website and the website just cannot handle the traffic. And so you're right. When you're in that moment where you need to perform, it's time to sell. That's the absolute worst scenario to happen. So it may seem hard to people as to see those scenarios when they haven't arrived yet. But yeah, you're investing now because it will pay long term. And so that's the biggest thing right there.
Yeah, great point.
So I'm even curious too. So now we've gone over a lot of your journey and how you got to where you are with your positions at Just Boardrooms and the Turn Lab. What exactly do you do, and what exactly do the companies do?
Well, it's really interesting that you said Just Boardrooms because we actually launched as Just Boardrooms and rebranded to Just Meeting Rooms a year and a half ago. And I'll tell you why. This is again is falling in love with the problem, right? So we just boardrooms was launched in the idea was conceived in the middle of the pandemic because what our research team was seeing was this real trend that was exposing both a belonging and collaboration deficit amongst knowledge workers that are at the time were working almost fully remote. But what they predicted, our research team predicted, turned out to be true, that even post lockdown, most companies weren't going back to work 5 days a week. There was always going to be some level of hybrid or remote, which again creates that belonging and collaboration deficit. So the hypothesis is what if we created kind of like an Airbnb model for meeting rooms that democratize access to professional meeting spaces so people can come together for moments that matter? People aren't going to come together all the time anymore. We don't need to sit right next to each other all the time, but we do need to come together for moments that matter. So when we launched it, we thought just boardrooms is a great idea. Like let's do it. And as we learned, and it did start growing nicely, but we started getting requests from people like I want to bring my team together, but I don't want anything as formal as a boardroom. Do you guys have anything else? So we started looking at, well, how do we solve that problem? So we started reaching out to a broader range of hosts. So instead of just co-working, we started reaching out to hotels. We started reaching out to architectural firms and law firms and ad agencies. And now on our platform, we have things like business lounges and theaters and photo studios and any place you bring people together to work together and collaborate. So we did a rebrand 18 months ago. That's a great example of always learning, always be curious and evolving as you go. So that I honestly I can't even express how flabbergasted I am at how successful that's become. We've been growing at double-digit compounded revenue growth per month.
Wow.
By beginning to middle of next year, we will be in 120 countries with over
Nice.
20,000 rooms. We are literally becoming the Airbnb of professional meeting spaces. So that again is a great example of just really focused attention on solving the problem. And we have a little cheat. The other company I own called the Turn Lab. It is a marketing technology company. So that's the incubator and engine behind just meeting rooms. So we're not like six kids in a basement banging out code. Like this is an actual enterprise. We've got great funders. Jim Treliving from Dragon's Den is one of our
Nice.
funders. John Ruffalo from Mavericks is one of our board members and funders. So we do have an amazing team. Like back to my earlier comment, surround yourself with really smart people, that have your interests in mind. Um, there's no such thing as a self-made man or woman. It's a collaborative effort. It takes a village. There's so many cliches that go along with that, but it is true. I think we're much better when we have a team that we can row together with, essentially.
No, I 100% agree. And even just hearing the explanation for your company, it seems so obvious now, like I said, with the whole COVID pandemic and what went down, despite all the lockdowns and everything, what it did prove for the business world is that, and something that corporations were always debating is to can remote work as effectively? Can hybrid work as effectively? We learned 100% that it can work just as effectively. And so on the whole, you don't need to have those brick and mortar spaces. You can do work over the internet and through Zoom meetings like we're having right now. But to your point, there are certain things I haven't experienced with my partner where some problems you want to go over, some things you want to show someone, it's not as easily communicated through just sharing your screen. You want to be in person, sit down and have that real face-to-face connection. And so I completely agree. It seems obvious now to look at it like, yeah, that business model just seems so straightforward because like you said, even after coming out of the lockdowns, businesses realized we don't have to have the brick and mortar spaces. We can save money on that and still just go a lot more remote with different aspects of our company. But when we do need to have those meetings, it seems like a great service to utilize. So that it seems like a genius idea that I'm surprised no one would have thought before. It's one of those you just kind of tap your head and go, how did no one think of that?
I know it is crazy when these things happen, but the biggest challenge with any business is get fast and far as quickly as you can around rant scaling, right? And that's really what we're
Yeah.
focused on. And that's why we're scaling so quickly because we know that, there are competitors with deep pockets that could come after us. So we have to get so deep into the market, which is what we're doing right now, that it actually creates a moat around what we're doing. Your business is a great example of the kind of user we have, right? You're
Yeah.
a small consultancy that has, big ambitions. There'll be times that you may want to pull together like a client for a workshop. Well, you want to do that in person. You don't want to do
Yeah.
that remote. It's way more effective. And so we basically give someone like yourself access to a you could access a room that you would not be able to get without our
Yeah.
platform. Like you could literally host a 200-person town hall on our platform if you needed it to for like if you landed like a major Fortune 500 company and you wanted to host a town hall on AI, you could do it on our platform. If you wanted just a four-desk room to pitch a client, close a deal, you could also do it. So that
Yeah.
democratization and really creating a frictionless way to give people access, I think that's really mission critical in this day and age with scarcity of resources, financial pressures. We have to use the sharing economy wisely. How do we make it so that things that already exist are better utilized? That's also from an environmental point of view. There's a major case to be made around more effective use of existing resources.
No, that's completely it. And like you said earlier too, to be able to be an effective business now, especially in the globalized world with the way things have been going and are continuing to go, you have to be able to move with speed. You need to be precise and accurate in what you're doing, but you need to move with speed, especially with new competition. Like you said, for small startups, when you're going against potential competitors that have much bigger pockets than you, yeah, you have to move effectively and with speed. And so, especially for being in 120 countries, it will be such a globalized company. It's amazing. If you're doing international business, you could be like, and thinking about it, you could be on the flight to wherever your next location is, and then booking the meeting room on that flight to have it be ready for the next day or even same day. Like it's incredible to think the speed that we can move with now. It's especially we were talking about earlier for when you came up in entrepreneurship and how you've seen these changes occur, where there was no email, very limited, if any, the internet was still kind of developing. How all this has come about, I'm sure it's been amazing to watch this full transformation in front of you and your journey as an entrepreneur.
Oh, it's incredible. I remember 14.4 modems and faxes, right? Like you're trying to get a deal done by a fax machine. I mean, it was just absolute torture. I think for our marketing lab, the Turn Lab, one of the things that I really impress upon our team is that, we have to engender a culture of innovation. And the only way to do that is to have a culture and a practice of experimentation, right? So the thing around all these changes and these wonderful things that are happening, they're driven by people and companies willing to risk.
Yep.
Are you willing to risk failure? Are you willing to invest in R&D? Like we invest a lot of time and energy in R&D, not a
Yeah.
lot of consultancies do that, as an example. We build a lot of technology that we leverage and test with both our paying clients and as well as our incubator, where we're just essentially risking capital to try to see whether we can solve problems. And I think there aren't enough companies, especially small ones, that make those kinds of investments in R&D, experimentation, test and learn. And I really encourage all entrepreneurs and all business leaders to just simply do more of that. If Canada wants to thrive in a global economy, we have to be producers of things. We need to be problem solvers. We need to be leaders around technology and innovation. So there's a real call to action amongst, young leaders like yourselves to really be builders. How do we create a culture of building things in this company, in this country?
No, you're entirely right. And it's one of those things I think Canada has the solid potential to be one of those great leaders, especially with the natural resources we have. We could be powering data centers for this new AI movement, for all that's going forward with technology. If we do things right, we have competent leadership, then I genuinely believe that Canada could be at the forefront for a lot of these changes and spearheading the progress that we need in society, both for the environment, for everything, just to be more efficient and, like I said, more productive as as a country. So, yeah, I'd entirely agree with that.
I mean, as a country, we've been so focused on resource, which is always going to be a big part of our economy. But how do we add value on top of those resources, right? To your point, it's not just about energy. How are we deploying that energy?
Yep.
It's not just about critical minerals. How are we deploying those critical minerals to add value? And so, interestingly, this federal budget, as much as it's got lots of things to unpack, one of the things I do like about the budget is that it's about big infrastructure investments, big investments around technology. These are things that we have to do. We can't just keep on having, Canadian startups get bought out by American global companies and then poof, it's out
Yeah.
of our economy again, right? Like we need to make sure that we're investing in ourselves.
No, I completely agree, and you're right. Just having the resources in and of itself is not the answer. You need to know what to do with the tools that are then given to you. Because unfortunately, it's like one of two cases. You could be a country like Japan where they have little to no natural resources, but they're still able to make a great economy. Their rise, especially over history, to see the success of the country is an amazing story to show that if you don't have the natural resources, you can still make it work. And on the opposite end, you could be like a place like the Soviet Union, where you have all the natural resources you can imagine, but if you mismanage them and you don't utilize them to how they should be put to work effectively, it'll get you absolutely nowhere as well. So you're right. Just because you have the tools is not enough in and of itself. You need to know how to put them into practice and execute.
And I think the other point, and this is a very personal thing for me, is, how do we apply all of that with a sense of purpose that we can rally our team around, right? So in my case, because, I was raised, with a family that was probably a little bit left leaning. I like things like social good, environmental responsibility. So I run our company as a certified B Corp. We run on a triple bottom line. We run carbon neutral. And I think that the interesting thing about, having those kind of sense of values is that you kind of attract like-minded people. I would say that our team is pretty diverse in terms of just backgrounds, thinking, ways of looking at the world, which I think actually adds to the value of innovation and experimentation, right? So
100%.
you bring different points of view, and sometimes those points of views are even in conflict, but that wonderful conflict creates new thinking.
Yep.
And so I think, as again, as entrepreneurs, is let's not just surround ourselves with an echo chamber. Let's surround ourselves with really talented people with diverse life experiences and diverse business experiences and give them room and space to contribute in a way that's productive and possible. Just hiring a more diverse person isn't the way to do it. You got to actually give everyone room to contribute. And I think that's an ongoing challenge for all businesses, including ours. But I think that's a really secret ingredient that Canadians can unlock more than other countries because we have so much diversity in our population. We have so much diversity in terms of our the way we have the way we look at the world. We are a little bit more centrist and open than some other economies. So I think we can leverage that more and really develop more innovation, more purpose as a country.
No, I completely agree, and you're right. If you're just surrounded with people that are too like-minded, and that you're right, it becomes a bit of an echo chamber, a silo, then yes, unfortunately, it's very easy to get stagnant where you'll pitch an idea and everyone says, "Yep, I agree," and that's it. There's no pushback, there's no "Well, how about this" or new ideas that can be presented. And if you can do it in a healthy manner, like you said, where you can have conflicting ideas, if people are able, and that was part of the roots of Western civilization, if you can have those conversations to say, "Well, I look at it this way, but you look at it that way," you can have whole new ideas emerge out of those conversations. So both people can have a greater understanding of the issue they're discussing and even come up with whole new solutions or ideas as to how to attack the problem. So it's incredible to hear your way of thinking because I agree with you entirely.
Yeah, when all this DEI stuff south of the border and it's leaked up here as well, the way I look at DEI, it's not about things like affirmative action. The way I look at DEI is how do we remove the barriers and the biases that are currently in place to prevent us from hiring the best person, period.
Yeah.
Not the best person we know or the best person that we think we like, but the best person, period. So for me, DI is about let's remove those barriers. Like I want to remove like if I have a bias in my mind right now where I don't think men are good multitaskers. How do I remove that barrier so that I make a position that requires multitasking open to a man, as an example, right? As
Yeah.
we all have our own specific biases, and so I think by creating practices and processes in place and culture in place to allow more openness to attract the best talent, period, is incredibly important for young companies in particular, where talent means everything, right? As much as AI is going to be such a game changer, if you don't have the right people managing that process and practice, you're still going to fail. So talent still is king.
No, I completely agree. Like you need to have the right people behind the wheel to operate the system because you like there's so many analogies to give. That's exactly it. You could have everything set up, but if you don't have the right person or the right people to execute it, it's really not going to mean anything. So you're right. Having the right team together who work together well and get along, it's absolutely huge for any successful company, team, any endeavor that you're working on. Now, one of the things I also wanted to work on is what are you seeing as some of the current trends, especially for your two different businesses and even how they're linked together? What are some of the current trends you're seeing in your industry right now, and what are even some of the upcoming things you're visioning for 2026?
So there's no question that technology, AI is just one piece of the puzzle and it's a big piece, but technology in general is creating just massive disruption in the marketing sector, communication sector, and we're going to see a lot of changes over time. There are big layoffs coming in the marketing sector as companies are learning how to streamline. To say that AI isn't going to impact the workforce is, I think, a bit misleading. There will be new jobs created. There will be retraining required. There'll be lots of things. But in the middle of all of that is going to be a lot of disruption. So I would say that if you're working in the marketing sector or communication sector, it is a lot right now about finding the right role, finding the right place, learning and adapting as individual professionals, as individual employees, but also as companies. How do we leverage the technology to be more effective as opposed to defending ourselves from a
Yeah.
technology that might harm us, right? So it's really shifting perspective. At the Turn Lab, we're a little bit different because we are a technology company. We literally build software and platforms. So unlike some other marketing firms, we've been deep into that since our inception. So, we're building AI agents and we're leveraging those in our day-to-day work. We're licensing AI products. We're builders of things, so that's a little bit different. I will say that the other piece that we're seeing is there's a lot of noise in the marketplace and a lot of distraction in the marketplace. I do think that companies in general, brands in particular, have to get really, really good at focusing who are they actually speaking to? Who do they want to pay attention to them? How are you planning to engage them throughout an entire customer journey, not just inserting yourself here and there? Because especially with AI coming into play here, that deep understanding of your customer and their journey is going to be so important for brands because there's so many intersections that are going to be distracting people from that journey that if you don't understand that well, you will lose, hands down. And so I think, our sector, and it's gonna, and by the way, it's not just our sector, finance. I mean, I talk to financial advisors who are terrified of their jobs.
Yeah.
Robo advisors have been around for a while now. It's going to get smarter and smarter and smarter. Yes, some people are going to want that human relationship. Your generation, I don't think so.
Yeah, I get you.
Most of the people in your generation don't care. You're happy to have a online experience that will give you probably faster and in some cases better advice
Yeah.
than the seasoned 60-year-old financial advisor who's been around for a long time. So I do think lots of industries will be disrupted that way, which is going to really see ongoing innovation around things like AI agents, the implementation of artificial data throughout all kinds of workflows as well as business models as well, not just workflow, but actual business model. So I think we're in for an interesting ride for sure.
No, I think you're entirely right. And I think, like with everything, it's always trade-offs. It's never just pure black or white as to is the AI transformation or revolution going to be good or bad for society? There's always a mixed bag to it. And I think very much it's going to be like the Industrial Revolution of old, where, like you said, with the benefit of hindsight, there's so much good that came out of it. But during that transition, that farm to factory transition, it is very hard for individuals and families having to adjust to those new circumstances. And so I think we're going to be going through something very similar where, like you said, new jobs will be created, but other ones will be lost. And it's having people try to go through that adjustment period. That's what's going to be difficult for some. But I also maybe am optimistic that way. I'd like to believe that, yeah, it's going to be better for everyone as in the end as we start to go through it all.
Yeah, and there's other factors at play. There's demographic factors too, right? I'll send you a white paper after our call because there's about $1 trillion in wealth moving to women in the next 5 years. So by 2030, women will hold 57% of all private wealth in Canada. So
Wow.
what's the impact of that? Well, it impacts a lot of things. It
Yeah.
impacts the way homes are purchased, the way automobiles are purchased. CIBC published a report a couple years ago that showed that 70% of women that were coming into inheritance, either by their spouse or by their parents, were planning on changing their financial advisors. Like that's just one little
Yeah.
snippet that could impact an industry like
Yep.
immensely. So this demographic shift as well, this transfer of wealth that's happening is going to have a major impact on industry and the economy. So it's not just technology,
Yeah.
right? There's lots of other things at play. Where is stablecoin, crypto? Where is all that going to fall down? Again, a good thing about this, the federal budget is they are actually addressing it, thank goodness. Not pretending it's not a thing.
Yeah.
I do think people like John Ruffalo and others that have been really like pressing on making sure that we're staying in front of that as a country is having some influence on some decisions on the political side, which will hopefully give us a bit more guidance as business leaders on how do we navigate through all the changes in the financial models, cryptocurrency, et cetera, which is going to become obviously a much bigger thing in the next 5 to 10 years.
No, that's exactly like you said. excuse me, it's affecting all different industries, and it's going to change the entire way the business world operates in every single sector. And that, like you said, even from currency to how we even just deal with business and how we exchange trade there to everything else. It could be financial sectors, real estate, marketing. Everything's going to be affected in some way by AI because I think every business can be improved in their efficiency by AI. And so a lot of things are definitely going to come and change that way. So it's really good to hear your opinion on that. I'm curious too, are there any specific, especially either right now or what you might foresee for 2026, any kind of challenges or opportunities that your companies are facing?
Well, I think from the just meeting room side, it is really going to be how do we continue the momentum? It's one thing to launch a startup. How do you become a scale up, right?
Yeah.
How do you be, ubiquitous essentially, right? Like an Airbnb, right? So that's really the big challenge of the next like probably 3 to 5 years is how do we really become that? And then what do we do with it? Do we do an IPO? Do we set ourselves up to be sold to a strategic buyer? Like all companies are built to sell, right? So what does that strategy look like? So all of that is in process. In terms of the Turn Lab, a lot of, our mission at the Turn Lab is to be the organizations that leaders come to face their biggest challenges. So we don't say marketing, we don't say technology. Most of our clients are C-suite level people. We deal with business leaders because we are the thinking partner. We deliver evidence-based strategies, we deliver technology, we deliver evidence-based marketing if that's what's required. So we love solving problems. So we're going to lean more into that, as we enter this deeper into this age of disruption. There's more leaders. They're worried. They're stressed out around this change, impact on culture, impact on morale. These are all things like we're going in and doing things like redesigning customer experiences for brands that are struggling with customer engagement. It's not really anything to do directly with marketing, right? It's what's pressing on their business right now. So I see us doing a lot more of that. We're currently probably about 50 people. We're probably going to get a lot bigger over the next few years as we're leaning more into this. So again, leadership team, building my team, building that out, getting good talent. These are all things that we'll be focused on over the next few years.
No, that makes sense. And like you said, especially since you're such a globalized company with being in 120 countries, are there any specific areas of the world that you want to target, or is it even just even acquiring more places that you could offer as boardrooms or meeting rooms for people to have? Is that one of the things you're also looking to pursue?
Yeah, I mean, we got approached by a company in the UAE actually last year who wanted to partner with us through their kind of hotel network in the UAE. And we started having some discussions with them. Obviously now those discussions are in a little greater earnest. We've got some opportunities in China that we're also exploring. There's some complicated markets, right? Like China's not an easy market to do business in. And so there's lots of learning along the way. Currencies, languages, when you're in 120 countries, you're dealing with all of that, right?
Yeah.
The biggest challenge with most Canadian companies is we think of it too Canadian, right?
Yeah.
Where like we might look at, okay, well, maybe we'll be doing the US. Well, you know what we found? We found our fastest growing market right now for just meeting rooms is actually the UK. We thought it was going to be the US. We thought it was going to be California, and we've got, hundreds of locations in California alone. We get more bookings in London, UK than we do in all of California. So we didn't know that, So
Yeah.
now we're reorienting some of our marketing and so I would say that try to stay humble through this process and realizing that we don't really know the answer, so we got to keep asking good questions. I think that's how we are approaching this kind of global expansion. Be humble enough to know that we don't know.
Yeah, no, that's exactly. I think you're right. That I understand that as you go to different parts of the world in this ever expanding business world we're dealing with, it's dealing with all different kinds of languages, like you said, currencies, different customs and cultures. And so it's fascinating to see, and it's in some ways interesting and good to hear that you're working with the UAE and the hotel company there. I'm actually going to Dubai later this week, so it'll be for a business networking event. So it's actually really funny to hear that. But even still, to hear the expansion in London that you guys are facing, it's to show that although it may have a long history there, it's still in some ways a financial capital of the world, and that London is still respected in that way. So that's really good to hear.
For sure, for sure. And we're going to stub our toes along the way, by the way. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to spend money in the wrong areas. But hopefully we're agile enough to, learn and pivot quickly as we go through
Yep.
that whole process.
No, that's part of the natural adaptation that we all have to adjust to. So that's amazing, brother. Are there any final thoughts or comments that you have that you might want to ask for me?
Well, I really love what you guys are doing, and I love to see young entrepreneurs like yourselves going out of the world and doing big things, and that seems to be what you're doing. I really also just would like to suggest that uh, you encourage others to build their network and to surround themselves with smart people. And it could be an old codger like me that's been doing it for decades, or it could be a young startup entrepreneur who's, stubbing their toes along the way. As much as we kind of ignore our parents and our family, they're often really smart. And by the way, they have our best interests in mind. It may not always sound like that.
Yep.
Like I've had some advice from my one of my siblings that really sounded terrible at the time that I went, "Oh my God, she was actually right. Why didn't I listen?" So I think, being a bit more open-minded that way and being a bit more humble and realizing we're not necessarily the smartest person in the room, but if we're the most curious person in the room, we can win.
No, you're entirely right. And it reminds me, one of my favorite authors, Thomas Sowell, a brilliant quote that he has is, "It takes considerable knowledge just to realize the extent of your own ignorance." And that's exactly it. Just to even acknowledge and know what you don't know. That's when it's also good to be able to go to others and take advice, especially people who are older than us, have been around the block. Although there may be that generational divide, they still have seen and experienced things we have not got to see and experience yet. So they can save us from having to go through a lot of the pitfalls that they in fact did go through. So completely agree with you there. It's always important to keep an open mind, and when discussing with people, always hear them out openly. Don't think that you just know more than everyone else just because you've done a few things right.
If I could leave you with one thought, I would say that, like, I would say every move I make is filled with certain amount of apprehension and fear.
Yeah.
Courage is actually not the absence of fear. Courage is facing your fear and doing the right thing regardless, right?
Yep.
The author Anais Nin has a great quote that goes something like, "Life expands and contracts in direct proportion to your courage." And I think
I
it's
like
a
that.
lovely thing to keep in mind is that there's going to be lots of things that are going to, strike fear in our hearts. So whether that's, "Oh my God, I got to mortgage my house to do this," or I don't know if I know how to do this. That's a really natural process. And for entrepreneurs, it's about just facing those fears and just taking some time, take a breath, and making the right sober moves in the face of those fears. That's really what the true definition of courage is, right? And I think that is a great path to success.
I completely agree, brother. Very well said. Thank you. It has been an absolutely incredible chat, so I think we can end it there. But it has been a pleasure speaking with you, Howard. Thank you very much for coming to the show. I hope everyone has enjoyed it. It has been an absolutely wonderful time.
Thank you so much, Zach.
Thank you.